Hi. Decided to start a read aloud for you, to read Swiss Family Robinson. I was thinking about a kind of story that might be good in these strange times, and was talking with my wife, and she suggested, why not the Swiss Family Robinson? There's a family who is certainly off by themselves. Some of you may have seen the movie. The book was written by Jonathan Weiss back in 1812. So some of the wording is a little different, and it's also told by, you'll find out who one of the main characters, and is the narrator, and that may color the story a little bit. I wonder how it might be if one of the other characters told the story. But here goes. The Swiss Family Robinson. Chapter 1. The Shipwreck. The tempest having continued during 6 long and terrible days, with no appearance of abatement, it seemed on the 7th to rage with redoubled fury. We were driven far to the southeast of our true course, and no one could form any idea where we were. While we were dejected and utterly worn out by the labor of our protracted watch, the masts were broken, the sails in tatter, and the ship, already full of water, threatened every moment to go down. And then there's a long prayer praying for his life and the life of his family. My poor wife, having dried her tears, assumed an aspect of composure, and cheered the children, who sought refuge near her. Yet it was with difficulty that I could master my own feelings, while I sought to excite them with submissive resignation. Then they prayed together, and suddenly we heard above the noise of the waves the cry, "Land! Land!" And at the same instant the ship received so violent a shock that we were convinced it had struck and must immediately go to pieces. The fearful noise and rending of the timbers gave new force to our terrors, and the water at the same time entered the ship with such force that we could no longer doubt all hope was over. As I listened, the captain shouted, "We are sinking! Cast a boat loose!" The cry went to my heart like a dagger, but I still sought to reassure my children, knowing how unavailing is despair. "Be of good cheer," I said to them, "and I'll go see if there remains for us, even now, a hope of safety." I left them and mounted on the deck, where I was immediately thrown down by a billow, which completely drenched me. Recovering myself, I gained a position where I was beyond the reach of the waves. I saw, to my horror, all the boats alongside. The whole crew were already overboard, and the last of the sailors, as he sprung after his companions, cut the rope and set them at large. I cried, I implored, and I conjured them to take me and my dear children, but in vain. The noise of the tempest drowned my voice, and the fury of the waves was such that it was impossible for the boats to venture back. All chance of escape seemed over. I remarked, however, with returning hope, that the water in the ship did not reach beyond a certain height, and that the part where my family still were was so firmly jammed between 2 rocks that there seemed to be no immediate danger of its sinking. Casting my eyes southward, I perceived land, which, notwithstanding its savage aspect, became immediately the object of all my hopes and desires. Returning to my family, I struggled to assume a calm demeanor. "Take courage, my dear children," I exclaimed on entering. "All is not yet lost. If the vessel remain fixed, our little cabin is still beyond the reach of the waves. And if the morrow were to come, and the sea abated, we may yet reach land." This assurance was received with transports of joy, and the children passed at once from despair to the opposite extreme of confident hope. They regarded it as certain that we must speedily escape, nor did I fail to note that the violent oscillations of the vessel had ceased, and that we were no longer thrown violently against each other by its motions. But my wife saw through my assumed composure, divined the grief that was in my heart. I made her understand by signs our entire situation, and I felt my courage sustained by seeing her Christian resignation. "Take some refreshment," she said. "The mind is strengthened with the body, and perhaps this weary night will pass away." The tempest continued with unabated fury. rending away all the loose timbers from the shattered ship and making the whole vibrate so that we expected every moment it would go into pieces. As I listened to the progress of the resistless waves, I could only comfort myself with the conviction that it was impossible the boats whose departure I had witnessed with such anguish could have escaped its fury. My wife had been able to procure some refreshments before darkness set in, and the children partook of them with excitement, after which they retired to their berths and were soon in a profound sleep, notwithstanding the noise of the storm. Fritz, the eldest, alone watched with us. "I have been considering," said he, "how we might be yet saved. If only we could find some means of keeping my mother and brothers afloat in the water, you and I, independent of such aid, we could swim with them to land." "A happy thought," I replied. "Let us take measures for putting it to test with the dawn." We accordingly sought in our little cabin for such empty barrels as might seem large enough to keep a person afloat. These we tied together in pairs, leaving space enough between them to admit of their being secured round the waist and below the arms of the children. This done, we collected together the most necessary and portable articles that we could secure about our persons, hoping that even if the vessel went to pieces before morning, we might thus be able to reach the shore. Fritz, being by this time worn out with his exhaustion, threw himself down on his bed and was soon asleep like the rest. As for me and my poor wife, we continued to watch, trembling at every wave which threatened to engulf us. It was a trying night for us both. Towards dawn, the wind began to abate, and I hailed with delight the morning rays breaking upon us as the clouds dispersed. I called my wife and children to me on the deck, when the latter for the first time perceived with astonishment that we were alone. "Where are the sailors?" they exclaimed. "Why are they not on deck with us?" "My children," I replied, "let us now get to work and try what we can do for our own safety. For God will not help those who do not help themselves." Fritz immediately exclaimed that the sea seemed even now so calm he saw nothing to prevent us all from swimming to land. But his younger brother Ernest replied, "It is all very well for you who are strong, but we cannot swim, and we will be drowned." "Trouble not your mind with such apprehensions," said I, "but rather go and see if nothing can be got that might be useful for our present situation." At these words all dispersed in different directions to see what could be done. In the meantime, I descended to the provision room to ascertain if we still had the means of present subsistence within our reach. My wife, accompanied with the younger children, proceeded to examine the livestock, already severely suffering from hunger and thirst. Fritz went in search for arms and ammunition. Ernest laid hold of the carpenter's tools, while Jack set off to ransack the captain's cabin. But the instant the little fellow opened the door, 2 huge dogs sprung out and leaped on him with such boisterous demonstrations of joy that he thought they were about to devour him. But he speedily recovered his courage, and on my return from examining the provisions, my surprise was great to find him mounted on the back of the largest of them, which approached as if to welcome my return. While smiling at this unexpected reception, the various explorers returned with their prizes. Fritz brought with him 2 fowling pieces with balls and well-filled powder flasks. Ernest held in his hand a hat filled with nails and a hammer, while the carpenter's pincers and rule protruded from the pouch, and little Francis appeared behind him with a packet under his arm, from which protruded fishing hook and lines. "As for me," said my wife, appearing at the same instant, "I am the bearer of good news, since I was able to inform you that we are still safely on board a cow, a donkey, 2 goats, 6 sheep, a ram, and a sow with young, the whole of which I have good hope may be preserved. All that you bring," said I, "is excellent, save Jack's companions, who will only use will be to eat up what we can recover." "Not at all," exclaimed the little fellow, in the highest spirits. "When we get to land, they will help us to hunt." "Yes," said I with some despondency, "but how are we to reach the land?" "Oh, easily enough," Master Jack replied. "Can we not get ashore in the great tub? I have sailed in it long ago on Grandpapa's pond. A happy thought. Good counsel sometimes proceeds even from the mouth of a child. Come along, then. Let me have the saw and hammer with some nails, and we shall see what soon can be done. We descended accordingly into the hold, which is already half full of water, on which, to our great joy, we observed 4 great empty casks afloat, which, without very great difficulty, we succeeded in getting upon the lower deck. I found them admiringly adapted to my purpose, and with my son's assistance, had them sawn in two. This was not accomplished without much labor, and we were glad when it was done. To refresh ourselves with some wine and biscuits, which we found at the table, I contemplated with much satisfaction my 8 lifeboats ranged in a row, and was surprised to see that my wife looked on them with an air of despondency and fear. I shall never be able, said she, to venture on the sea with one of these. Do not be so sure of that, my dear, I replied. My work is not yet finished, and you will soon see that these tubs are more to be depended on than this shattered wreck. I then took a long, flexible plank, and on this I arranged my 8 tubs, nailing them firmly to it. I secured 2 other planks in like manner along the sides, and by the time my work was finished, I produced a very tolerable boat, divided into 8 compartments, and which appeared by no means unsuited for navigation over a calm sea. But I discovered to my dismay, when my work was done, with all our united efforts, we could not move it an inch. I called for a jack screw which I observed before, and meanwhile I set to work to saw up a spar into short rollers. One of these Fritz contrived into a slip under an end of our boat, while I raised it up with the screw. I next attached a long rope to the raft, and to the other end of which I secured to the ship. And then, placing the other 2 rollers in front, I soon had the satisfaction of seeing it in motion, with the aid of the jack, until at length it was fairly launched into the sea, with such impetus that, but for the precaution I had adopted, it might have been carried far beyond our reach. The next difficulty arose from too great buoyancy of our novel craft, which I feared must be upset if we attempted to enter it. But a sufficiency of ballast soon removed this objection, and everything seemed ready for our escape. My children raised a shout of joy at the sight, and contended who should be the first to enter. I saw well, however, that we could not venture in it with safety, as the slightest movement would still be liable to upset it. To obviate the danger more effectively, I proceeded to construct outriggers similar to those which various native tribes employ for the same end. Having selected 2 spars, I secured one across the stem and the other at the stern of my little craft. The ends of these I thrust into the holes of the 4 empty casks, and securing them so that they should not impede our embarkation, I looked upon my novel boat with a degree of confidence that assured me of safety. It was now necessary to steer it out from among the fragments of the wreck which surrounded it. I got into one of the open casks or tubs, and succeeded in pushing out so as to clear the wreck safely and accessibly till our other preparations were complete. It was late before our plans were thus far carried out, and we saw that all idea of escape for the day must be abandoned. We were, therefore, under the necessity of passing another night on board the wreck, though conscious that it was in danger of going to pieces by morning. We now took for the first time a hearty meal, the engrossing nature of our work having hitherto prevented us obtaining more than slight refreshment of wine and biscuits. I also advised my wife to exchange her dress for that of a sailor, so much better suited for the exertion she would have to undergo. This I had some difficulty in persuading her to adopt, but after reasoning the point with her, she withdrew and speedily returned in a dress which had belonged to one of the seamen. The novel costume made her feel very awkward at first, but the feeling soon wore off, and as I cheered her with good hopes of the morrow, she retired to her hammock and was soon enjoying a tranquil sleep. The best preparations for the labors that were before us. And that is the end of chapter 1.